Johnson. This is Commissioner of Indian Affairs, Mr. Emerson, and his Secretary, Mr. Martin. I'll come right to the point. We staged that jailbreak. We wanted it to look as if your friends broke you up.
We have a job for you, Jane. A job which requires absolute secrecy.
How about that point you were coming to?
A group of white renegades is smuggling guns to the Indians. We've got to find out who they are before we have an Indian war on our hands.
6 months ago, we sent out 2 of our best agents. Their bodies were found horribly mutilated.
We thought we'd send a woman. A woman who can take care of herself.
Like me, for instance?
Yes, Jane, like you. We need your help desperately.
What's the price tag on this?
Jane, you're facing a jail sentence of 10 years. You get those men for us, and we'll give you a pardon. A full pardon.
Gentlemen, I'd like to go on record as saying we can't trust this
criminal.
I think we can. Here's proof of my competence.
Well, it's mighty nice of him. Breach. Thanks for the drink, Governor.
Jane, outside that window, there's no pardon.
Unless you help us, the West will be drenched with the blood of white settlers. Thousands of lives, women and children.
You could stand a little practice, son. I'll take a look at that pardon. Keep talking.
You'll take the stage tonight. At Fort Deerfield, contact a lawyer named Jim Hunter. There's a wagon train going west. You'll both join it. Hunter will pose as your husband.
As man and wife, you'll be lost in the crowd on that wagon train. You'll get further instructions from Hunter.
We're depending on you, Jane.
I'm depending on you. And I wouldn't...
I'm looking for a determined woman like that. And I thought I'd find you in America, but we didn't get the interview last night. And this is typical of the politics in the US. And the sad thing is that it's a joke about the genocide of all of the Indians there. I've been telling you about the politics of the US, the elite groups that run it, the Freemasons that run the presidency forever, and all of the culling of the indigenous nations, and all the road movies that Bob Hope and Bing Crosby made are about the brutalization of the whole world for a laugh. Yeah, and for Hollywood. And I'm now going to take you back to the modern day issues that I was talking about when my batteries ran out a few minutes ago. The bad news is that when you hear the thunder and lightning, we've got storm clouds around our town tonight because the politicians are electioneering, and you get the impression that the gods are not pleased with the choice that is here. John Lamont is talking in the revolutionary Queen's Head Hotel. Yeah, goodness knows where Michael Moore has the conscience to appear nowadays, but tomorrow is the general election in the UK, and all of the deals are much dirtier than this one. Okay, this is about the culling of the Indian nations, and it's about the power base that get that job done, and the reverence that come at them in world history. Okay, let's now take you back to the...
I wouldn't advise you to cross me up, James.
Oh, sorry dear.
So she finally agreed to go.
And the hero's name is Potter. Yeah, that's the joke about the dead and the ashes, and all of it takes you into the Old Testament and the last and forever jokes about world ownership and who's got access to the one true God. It's ever so divisive, but all of the Indian pagans are gone. So this is the one. So we visited the Cornell University website to get started on this, and we found articles on the know-nothings, okay, and we're on page 91 of that story now, with the Freemasons, the law specialists coming into the team, the Jesuits being launched out of the Vatican, and the I forget the name, I think it's Ignacious that was the saint who was the first Jesuit. They have an evil mission, and the Jesuit oath is quite sinister, but I don't tend to get to buy into that, because all of these stories are retold and switched around so that everybody lives their whole life in fear. Okay, and this is the Making of America website from Cornell University Library, and we got half through the article on the know-nothings. That's the Notting Hill and Nottingham Forest jokes. Okay, it's really funny, and in Hollywood it's the Marx Brothers that spread the news that world ownership is a joke, because they see no evil, speak no evil, and hear no evil. Yeah, that's Harpo Marx, who's perfectly capable of speaking in English, but he spends his whole life pretending he's a mute. Yeah, and that is the Freemasonic oath. Yeah, you condone everything that happens as long as you can keep your friends by paying your subscription to stay in the secret society, in the lodge, in the underworld. And the ordinary Masons are much less menacing than the really clever guys, yeah, that run the world, run their financial services frauds, run their genocides, and run the training of all of the new generations. In America, they've had student fees for way over 70 years. They're massive fees. I talked to medics on the river, and they were paying, I think it was $250,000 when they qualified as medics, and they were halfway through their career path, and they still owed more than half of that to the moneylenders that are the usual suspects. Yeah, and when the interview was cancelled with no notice last night, I began to learn that the place where the interviewee was is in Minnesota. And guess what was located in Minnesota? The Federal Bank. That's the Rothschild-owned Federal Bank. They had financial crashes in 1857, 100 years before I was born. Yeah, and the financial crashes that occurred there are exactly like the financial crashes that occur to take them into World War I, World War II, and all of the great conflicts that have occurred across the globe. And America, through that very turbulent period when these issues were actually published and written about, yeah, it was a massive genocidal period. Okay, let's take you back to the transcript and the philosophical writings of the killers who laugh at the leather stock jokes, who laugh at the leather gear that the cowboys wear, because the leather is from the buffaloes that are now almost extinct. And there's the pale-faced joke from Scotland again. Yeah, and this is a philosophical, I'm a doctor of philosophy, this is a philosophical bullshit debating society, debating about jokes like Robin Hood and the Nottingham Forest region. Yeah, and all of that is a joke about freedom and stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. All of that sadly is a myth. Everything is totally inverted in world history, which is why I showed you one of the Hollywood movies, and it has not got the Indians in it yet. I might be able to use the footage because we've got, quite surprisingly there, the whole movie online for free. Everything is a for-profit operation now. Right, let's go back to the Right, so we got through to Weishaupt, the law involvement, and we've been through the involvement of the Essen arrangement, which emerges allegedly from the Holy Lands but ends up being Essen in World War II for the bombing events, and all of the munitions factories in the Essen region run by the Krupps family. Does not say this in this, because this is ever so romantic. Yeah, and what they do is to cover it up with literary fantasies and mythical stories from the Greek legends and all of that bullshit stuff. Yeah, it keeps the world divided and enthralled with the mysticism, while everybody's poor relatives get buried in shallow graves. Okay, this is where we left off, and I'm going to start here with the Jesuits again. A student of Pythagoras and the Rosicrucians, Weishaupt's primary object appears to have been to organise a movement against the Jesuits, with whom he had a long and sore quarrel, but he was not slow in giving his order a cosmopolitan extension. A republican, a moralist and a scholar, he sought to extend republicanism, morality and learning to the whole human family. It's ever so compassionate when you read it. All of them understand the fraud networks intimately, which is why they're in the professoriate in the elite universities. In order to do this more effectually, he resorted to the known influences of decorations, symbolic initiations like the baldric and the medals, etc., which impress the popular imagination and the heart. You should see what the ordinary soldiers have to wear. That's the lederhosen and the kilt jokes. Yeah, the kilt jokes are vicious. People get killed in the kilt because they follow the leaders to the beat of the drum. By the sole attraction of mystery, by the single power of association, to submit to one will and to animate with the same breath thousands of men in every country of the globe, to make entirely new beings of these men by a slow and progressive death. No, it doesn't say death, it says education. To render them obedient to madness, to death, to invisible and unknown leaders. Yeah, trained all in the elite mind control institutions that are Tavistock, that are St. Petersburg in Russia, and are institutions like the Brookings and the Royal Institute for International Affairs, run by Her Majesty the Queen. And then you've got all of the former presidents' coalitions and the Bill Clinton Foundation. All of them are on the take, and they will kill and steal but pretend that they're in the education sector like Bill Clinton does. The video I made on him that reveals the rich families across the world, but particularly in America, is still banned globally. It's had no views other than by me, its creator. Okay, so where were we? Oh, and this is the annihilated bit. Every monarchy abated, every privilege of birth declared. So there is a Saint Ahniala in the Netherlands. It's tragic, and it's driven by mythology and the artistic writings of these bastards, the secret societies that own and run the world. And the academics in every institution now get no funds, because the Rothschilds own all of the central banks around the globe, and they control the issuance of money everywhere, and none of the money goes to public sector institutions or even these long privatized universities in America. So there's the annihilated bit. So we did this in the first one, and let's just finish off. Every monarchy abated, every privilege of birth declared unjust, the very right of property abolished, and the equality of the first Christians proclaimed. Christianity is a fraud, by the way, and the ownership of the land is also a fraud. Watch the Out of Africa movie and see that everything, even in the colonial Africa, belongs to the Crown in England, as does my lovely front garden. Yeah, the whole outside world is subdued now because the truth's coming out, and we have not got the threat of lightning since I started to speak. Yet the thunderclouds have dispersed, but the politicians are still down in the town talking up their role in life, which is to dismember our capability. All of it planned by these massive psychological mind control mechanisms under the name of philosophy. Right then, the German mind was agitated with wonders and novelties. A curate named Gassner, so this is the Gaza jokes, yeah, Gaza is the football player in Britain who's now accused of tax evasion and is being prosecuted by the corrupted police force. That's the police force run in the Northumberland region by the former Metropolitan Police and University leader man called Lord Stevens of Kirkwhelpington, a friend of the Dukes and Duchesses and trained in fetes with all of the rest of the criminal police leaders, who exorcised devils and cured the sick by simple formularies, counted almost 1 million of adherents. At Leipzig, immense crowds gathered in the public square to see the ghost of the magician Schoffa. Numerous interpretations of the mystic book of the Revelations were circulated, and the Queen of Prussia and her women themselves maintained that they had seen the White Lady. That's the Lourdes jokes. Yeah, do you see it? It's like the whole of the religious story. They put somebody in a costume and the Elephant Man attracts a huge amount of attention, and everybody at the circus is a massive hit because the circus is a joke about the Piso menagerie, and you've got magicians pulling white fascist rabbits out of top hats that the bankers wear, and all of it is a stitch up. Okay, thus sensibly to the marvelons was widely awake, and thus Weishaupt attracted the simple by their hopes and fears. Yet that's the War Office, the propaganda events, the terror menace, and everything that Michael Moore spouts. I feel obligated to post a video on John Lamont this evening because I've already declared that Michael Moore runs the death threats out of his little secret office in Glasgow. That's the Crawl security system, and John Lamont is talking within a few, maybe 100 yards of one of the Julian Lamont's registered companies. That's FBR in Kelso. One has no idea whether he will be taking cash home to Coldstream in a suitcase. Yet all of them are on the take, and all of them are desperately sad, and John Lamont looks as if he has 2 bodyguards with him this evening because I went in and had a jocular conversation with him. I will not waste my time by listening to him speak again. He's an expert in law. He's an advisor on law to the Scottish Government, and he's an advisor in the 2 most corrupted years of the Scottish Government's existence since I came back from New Zealand. Weishaupt attracted the simple by their hopes and fears, and the great by their love of power. Counts, dukes and noblemen of all grades became his disciples, and a perfect fanaticism in the cause of enlightenment in the new light sprang up when the order was formally suppressed amid storms of rage and conflict by the King of Bavaria. Oh, we got this far in the last video because this takes us into Hitler's nest. The jokes about Innsbruck, the jokes about the baby Jesus, no room at the inn, and all of it is a massive series of frauds. And that's where Hitler drove his Mercedes fleet up Autoroute 999 to the top of the mountain, and the Von Trapps went in the other direction trying to find their place in the Austrian Navy when Austria is totally landlocked. And that's the joke about the submarines and sinking the ships through all of World War II as a betting scandal for True Love and Wilson. But Cagliostro took up its rent and dissevered mantle and in that wonderful compound of mesmerism, legerdemain, magic, exorcism and folly, by which he was as the grand copter, that's the Copshy home joke about the place where Bothwell lived, when Queen Mary of Scotland was looking for lovers. Yeah, and Queen Mary of Scotland was not nearly as ruthless as Calamity Jane that you saw in that movie clip. Yeah, and then we get which Goethe has finally ridiculed. That's the Goethe that does the shootings from the balcony in the Schindler's List film. Okay, we've done all of this before. The story of the diamond necklace. We have no space now to speak of the Santa Hermandad of Spain. This is where we left off. The Carbonari of Italy, the Lombard brothers of Denmark, and a score of other secret institutions which have arisen at different times in different countries, and we refer to those we have named only as an illustration of one or two important principles. They show that this bent to mysterious brotherhoods is a permanent phenomenon of history, and it absolutely dismembers the concept that we can ever get to civilization, while they help us to explain the causes, because no one is accountable for the secret policy making that they do behind the locked doors. No one is able to publish it. If they do, they will get topped like Sean Hoare in London. While they help us to explain the causes of their sudden and prodigious success, as well as their inevitable tendency after a temporary triumph to dissolution and decay, which is what we have now, which is why these clouds are desperately black over the politicians' speaking venues this very evening. A great many people ascribe their advent and sway to mere delusion or trickery, but they have a deeper foundation in human nature, yeah, which is the whole of my current project. Yeah, it is a tendency to steal and kill those who are not prepared to steal and are prepared to work for democracy and for the countries in which they live, and not to dismember their sovereignty and their capability, for which the cunning and the few and the folly of the many, that easy solution for troublesome problems, will not entirely account. In their origin, the greater number of these associations have been really benevolent. It does not have inverted commas around it. Can you hear the emphasis on me saying really benevolent in an inverted commas manner, and of sincere and earnest purposes, a true honest sympathy in the cause of mankind, a chivalric and heroic enthusiasm and profound religious convictions have often lain at the roots. Every one of the messianic religions and all of the religions around the globe are about humans proclaiming that they are greater than gods, and the gods do not like that. This was the case with the ancient mysteries, with the Knight Templars, with the Illuminati, with the revolutionary societies of Europe, which culled everybody on all sides, provided they were poor enough, and with many of our own secret charitable societies. And it was with this which mainly fastened upon them the regards and attachments of their followers. For the theory of delusion, of imposture, and a wilful trifling and hocus pocus, yeah, this is the philosophy coming through. Wilful hocus pocus, which certain minds consider amply adequate for the clear we're able to turn the pages this time, the clearest explanation of whatever is strange or surprising in this strange world we hold at the cheapest rate. Great and stirring movements, movements which extend over large tracts of space, yet they pretend in recent years to have gone to the moon. 1968, they've never done it again. The computer now is the size of your telephone. Yeah, in the days of 1968 it was the size of half a laboratory, or half the director's office at the corrupted newspapers that tell the story as if it were real, which conquer a species of perplexity as to time, which if they do not survive in a continuous line, still reappear with an evident constancy, diving down like a duck in one age, because the sportsman's shotgun perhaps is levelled that way. To come up in another, do not argue a universal and undying gullibility in our race, but deeper principles at work and striving to get acceptance. Yeah, the politicians could be really, really popular if they were to break away from the moneylenders that keep them enslaved as puppets, but they're picked for their sins, and that is highly unlikely, and if they step out of line they are topped and rendered jobless like me. The specific causes, although John Lamont does look like a much more decent chap than Michael Moore, but that is bias and prejudice, and Michael Moore has already been cast from office and is a constitutional and massive financial criminal. We are considering several, and among the first, the inherent and irrepressible love of our poor human nature for mystery itself, mystery which is consubstantiate. That's the word that the Catholics use now. Consubstantial, don't know what the hell it means, if we may so express it, with the infinite depth and yearnings of our souls. Yeah, it's quite easy for those things to be sold now, several times in the same lifetime. We all of us feel at times with Thomas Brown, the schoolboy, as if, maybe not, is that Tom Brown's school days? Yeah, I think so. As if, oh no, it was John Brown, as if there were not miracles enough in the universe to fill our boundless capacity for faith. Yeah, you believe in the messianic presence of the faked up gods, and the God in the skies is looking down at everything you do, but almost everybody fails to see the signs. But that's changing now. But without entering in these profounder regions, we do not know that a simple secret shared between one or two persons is a bond of union and amity, and a source of peculiar enthusiasm, ? I don't know what the hell they're talking about most of the time, but that is the literary world, and these are the speechwriters that will be operating all over the country this very evening. When the heart of the young man has spoken, the word brooded over in silence so long, with tremendous alternations of fear and hopes to the heart of the maiden. Does not the world take on another hue and fill up with an unwanted glory? ? No inverted commas at all. What sweet and blessed radiance hovers over the secret nuptial couch, which one glimmer of the day, one prying eye, or one listening ear would wither and dash into darkness? Speech, says the German proverb, is silvern, but silence is golden. That's the song about the killing of JFK, sung by, I forget what their names were. One's got tight curly Jewish angel hair, Simon and Garfunkel. Yeah, that's prejudice too. Please don't tell anybody I said that. I have no evidence at all that the Garfunkel guy is Jewish, but his hair used to be curly. Bees will not work except in darkness, says Carlyle, the local hero from just along the road, right next door to Gretna, where you can get a free marriage. Without all the ties that are hanging up a lot of my life and wasting a lot of my time, because they keep trying to find grounds to accuse me of anything, and they cannot do it. Thought will not work except in silence, neither will virtue work except in secrecy. Yeah, so you've got to keep it a strict secret that you're doing something good, and everybody can see that that is a lie in itself. It is not, however, secrecy itself so much as a communion of secrecy which weaves the charm. Are you following it? I'm a simple person. It's really confusing, but I want you to know that this is what the leaders think is required of them to run a competent, capable and prosperous world. Let the silence and secrecy relate not to a few but to a multitude. Let it span the earth with its unseen mystic ties. Let it trace itself back to hoar and venerable antiquity and look forwards to the far visionary future, linking the two together. Remember, this was written in 1850 by awful truths which dare not be avowed and yet must be propagated, communicating in the broadest daylight by unseen telegraphs and stretching out in the gloom of night a bloody hand, as in the Macbeth fiction. No, it doesn't say that, I just made that up. But the Macbeth story is the Stratford-on-Avon frauds, and they are massive. Spalatro's vision, while back of all there stands a vast, intangible, dark association woven into a complicated network of affiliated association, having its agents everywhere, omniscient as the eye of Caesar, omnipotent as the hand of death. And what a mingled fascination of terror and power and glory steals into our thoughts. Yeah, I'm thinking now about the 4-year-old boy that was Dave Allen, looking at the Christian cross behind him, and the nun asking him whether he would behave. Connect the idea of benevolence with it, or the watch and ward of some high truth, and the secret spell becomes a grand enchantment. It recalls those imposing oriental fables of subterraneous spirits who guard the sacred treasure beneath the root of the sea. That's the Minotaur joke. They've already used it in Greece. They brutalized China and the Orient for 200 years for their narcotics wealth before they went further east and into the Burmese Golden Triangle. It's sick. Who guard the sacred treasure beneath the root of the sea, or we think of the mystic virgins who in the depths of caves, muffled from human sight, shelter the flame of life, or flitting images of the everlasting wanderer who bears from generation to generation a knowledge of the sorrows and woes of his race, of which he must not wholly unburden his breast, impart a kind of supernatural sublimity, or at least an apparitional and portentous greatness to the conception. I think that must be about the Pirates of the Caribbean, and it's got the skeletons at the back, at the last bit. Yeah, everything is about globalized mysticism as they steal relentlessly from the poor and they enslave them for huge chunks of human history. There's another cat outside. I'm really bemused by the dogs and cats story. The symbolism of these societies, the impressive rites and ceremonies, the brilliant decorations, the dignities and orders, is a second cause of the powerful appeal which they make to human nature. Are you following it? Our ordinary life, save under certain exceptional circumstances, this is, remember, the say-nothing groups. Yeah, we know nothing. Yeah, and I think they're quite correct. We tire of the arid deserts over which, with our halting caravans, this is the genocide's joke, and heavy merchandise, that's the tanks, we pass wearily and we run like children towards any verdurous plain or purling brook. That's the Piso joke with the word purr in it. That's the Shania Twain leopard skin joke and all of the Piso menagerie in the circus. And all of these guys in all of the elite institutions know the story inside out. Where was I? The purling brook. Yeah, the brook. It's the Innsbruck joke all of the time. The surname Brooks is the only fascist that I know in our town, listed with the BNP. He's quite happy to declare that, and he's quite entitled to his own opinion. But the Labour men who join the Conservatives do disappoint me, though it would prove only a fata morgana. There's the banking dynasty coming into the artistic and Italian Latin writings. Our souls feel themselves regal, that's the king by the way, while our environments are squalid and beggarly. Yeah, that's the Gallipoli trenches, lying in mangers, swaddled in rags, toiling as the ox or the ass never toiled, exhausted, overtasked, feeding on husks, with a curtain of drab drawn across the glories of the landscape and the sunrise. We are yet conscious natives of palaces, at home amid flowers and wine and music, and the dresses studded with gems, and a high and stately intercourse. That's the shagging, yeah, to keep your bloodline alive. And they're desperately sad stories, and they get syphilis all the time, and they deserve it entirely, but it's the moneylenders what impose it on the innocent people. But the innocent people dare not stop it, or they get what Princess Diana get, and a life whose appliances are splendour and whose motions are graces and harmonies. Even the simulation or mere appearance of these is seductive. Whatever recalls to us a sense of our true destiny, whatever represents it to our imaginations, though intrinsically puerile and flatulent, that means farting, I think. Yeah, and you can get charcoal biscuits for that, and that is not polypharmacy. It's quite innocent, and it works, I'm led to believe. It's a simple absorption, and there is no profiteering in that sector. Yeah, just yet, as far as I'm aware. High-sounding titles, regalia, the pomp of ceremonies, banners, ornaments by the looks of things. We need to scan down and flip to the next page. This is an e-library at the University of Cornell. Yeah, and it's ever so up your arse, but it runs the world this way, and they're quite happy, the victims of it, to be bemused by how the speeches do not mean anything to them, but they absolutely adore the political figureheads, because they are celebrities. And if you're famous in this world, or infamous, it's the same thing. You have celebrity status, and you can get away with murder and genocide, as Michael Moore knows. He went to Afghanistan in a helicopter, and when I fell out with the Americans this morning, they posted a helicopter as a threat to me. Yeah, that's the Americans that would not engage in the interview last night, despite all of the hours that I put into the preparation of it. And I doubt that it's the girl that I was going to talk to, but our controllers are ruthless, and the night before when we arranged the interview, you still might be able to see the ruthless bombardment that we were given with the F and C words about folk demonising Mrs. Thatcher beyond the grave, which is what the paid plants are paid to do, and trivialise the whole of the political sector, and especially when people are dead, or you've got somebody like North Korea that has been stolen entirely and planted false leaders, and you can demonise them as long as you're not talking to civilised and intellectual people that have a real grasp on life, and denounce you for demonising those countries that are now owned by the G8. That's how wars start, John Patterson. And you understand that because you know that nothing ever changes, and in every video I make and do the talking in, you acknowledge that. So, secret societies, the know-nothings, page 93, is welcome in the absence of reality. Not one logical, menstruative faculty exclaims Teufelsdrock. Yeah, but our imaginative one is king over us, priest and prophet to lead us heavenward, or magician and wizard to lead us hellward. Yeah, so I now reckon that I've taken on the status of the wizards, who they used to burn, and the witches used to be burnt as well, or put in a stool and chucked into the ocean and drowned. Yeah, and they've got all sorts of moral rules that mean if that innocent person who's tied to the stool or tied to the stake is innocent, that they will survive the frying or the drowning. Isn't that good and romantic? Yeah? And they're openly declaring that they can raise the dead, but it's a magic trick. Yeah, like sawing the woman in half. And Bruce Forsyth and the man with the fox on the telly used to do those things on air. Yeah. And none of it is associated with the resurrection of the White Lady. Yeah, or the event at Lourdes, or the resurrection of Jesus. I don't know how the clerics are going to recognise Jesus when he shows up in his second coming, because I'm a good man and I've been baited like crazy for being good, and they try and lock those people up. And when they do, and they succeed in killing messianic stories, yeah, it becomes the route to our salvation. It is so twisted, it's incredible. But it's the philosophers that get the six-figure salaries in the universities that dream it up. And they now work in the media. By the brilliancy of courts, heraldic coats of arms, military ensigns, the insignia of office, baldricks, yeah, you now know what a baldric is, yeah, the cross-chest banner that says, I'm a killer, and I'm reasonably high ranking, and I don't wear the lederhosen or the kilt that is going to get me into the dysentery, and then is going to get me dead, and is going to then make me part of the war graves tourism sector. And comparisons, buttons and decorations, and the magnificence of rights, they have wielded the minds by first dazzling the imaginations of men. That's wartime. This is unhinged. Yeah, that's killing of people in squalor with automatic weapons and eventually nuclear weapons, because the moonshot is not real, but the events that occurred in Japan are. Consider an army without its gay trappings and uniforms, its standards and parades, its lederhosen little shorts, yeah, and all of its little pennies and things that are a joke about world ownership and how pliant the stupid people are, its pomp and glorious circumstance. Consider Catholicism without its robes and cassocks and painted windows and gilded altars and waving incense and the daily miracle of the host. That's the bread and wine magic trick. Yeah, I've been trying it here for ages, and I can't even get the fair maidens who buy the cheap buckfast to share their secrets anymore. I have not put that girl in a named documentary yet. She's lovely, and she's not quite as quick as me in the chase down the high street. Secret societies, in the third place, are often a necessary resort under the lynx-eyed and powerful despotisms which lie in wait for the appearance of new truth. Yeah, a new conspiracy theory about a new religion and a terror training camp somewhere in the deepest jungles, which only the BBC and Fox News know how to find. Within minutes they are passing by with the MPs with blood on their collar. Jim Murphy, friend of Israel. More perhaps than any other cause has this one led to the formation of hidden agencies for the defence and nurture of cherished doctrines. That's all of the bullshit that leads the world to war through all of human history. It is well said by Confucius, oh, we're back into China again, and the baking sector, that when light came into the world, 1,000 spirits of darkness stand ready to seize upon her and strangle her in her birth. Yeah, like the Marcus Aurelius scene. Yeah, he was getting on a bit, admittedly, but all of them that take part in those films about world ownership come to an early death, and Marcus Aurelius was very reluctant to make the Harry Potter movies because his name is Potter. Yeah, like the husband of that really ballistic woman with the 2 handguns that you saw. Yeah, she marries Bob Hope and it is entirely for espionage and geopolitical advantage. But she's a spirited woman and they are really difficult to find. Every new truth, especially if it be important truth, which menaces old establishments or rebukes ancient manners. That's the ancient traditions of lining up the deserters in wartime and shooting them. And opinions has to fight its way inch by inch to general acceptance. Consuming fires of persecution are kindled round it. Legions of stipendiaries hang over it with their swords. Popular malignity watches it with jealous care, or mitred priests and crowned kings let loose their ubiquitous police of spies and spearmen to dog its track and arrest or thwart or crush out its life. I can actually confirm that that is still in place. Yet it's my story. And this week I've begun to negotiate the film rights, and it kind of spooked my wife's divorce solicitor, because she's getting on a bit. Oh, sorry, I should not say such cruel things. It was for this reason that the early Christians guarded so zealously the admissions to the small number of their disciples. Yeah, the story is an official secret for national security reasons, and it is shared between the Christians and the elite Jews, and their massacres are massive, and they fight as Jewish leaders for the Christian armies, that is the Roman armies, and the Jesus Christ has exactly the same initials as Julius Caesar. They celebrated their worship in caves and catacombs. They're actually called Mithraea, but if they were to declare that, it would sound really posh, as if they were glinting and they had armour and mithril vests on. Yeah, that's part of the Lord of the Rings joke, but it is the catacombs where the Catholicism and the new churches were launched from. There is no divide between the Protestant nations and their leaders and the corrupted papacy and all of the for-profit events that ensue in those wonderful decorative buildings that these stupid people, no, they're really clever people actually, but what they write is incomprehensible bullshit that keeps the people enthralled, and it is really tragic that the world can be gulled like that. In caves and catacombs, and stole furtively from land to land like outcasts, hunted by dogs or guilty wretches, flying from the presence of their fellows. Yeah, they're persecuted, and that still happens, and that's called martyrdom and revenge attacks, and Ireland is really good at it, even although the politicians know that there is no division between the major religions, and all of the people that get involved in the Irish terror campaigns have had to be put in prison again this very year, because I'm onto them. I'm onto their director numbers and how they share the power base to keep the people in fear, for this reason, that the aspiring minds of Europe, who would cast from the backs of the people the heavy weight of wrong which centuries of royal and priestly oppression, oh, they've got something right, have heaped upon them, must machinate in secret, must move in the shadow of the woods, or under the pale light of stars. Yet that's the universe that the gods made. Must bury their papers in tombs and send their dispatches through the air and gather adherents by conspiracy. Yet Michael Moore is really effective as an actor for the demonisation of Islam. I've seen him at work. Even the students can see through him. He had no answer to what is the economic policy north of the border, and when I said to him, why are we better off together when you're stealing from students, and a girl from Bath University, where the students' loans company is run by Gwyneth Breakwell, was stunned to learn that the fees are only a new thing, and that in 1995 Michael Moore and me got our education entirely for free, all the way into the corrupted Houses of Parliament or the Professoriate, or undermine and elude and ferret and circumvent, echo, this is in inverted commas, must not babble of their whereabouts, nor the lightest footfall betray them to sudden death. This is the covert Christian movement. Yeah, and this is why in Abelard Roykland's story, that as soon as the Christian movement begins to get its horrific threats out about what's going to happen to your soul, that you do not need police and soldiers on every street corner, because it's a master plan, and it was invented after writing was invented in Canaan, and the writing now is so incomprehensible that it's rendered virtually meaningless. But it gets you a six-figure salary if you work at Cornell, and you don't even have to give your real name. Yeah, like Abel Danger. All the dread machinery of government, all the selfish instincts of power are their enemies. Ah, what a story of hairbreadth escapes and adventures, of heroic daring and subtle sagacity, of impossible communications across barriers and cordons, finally achieved insuperable obstacles, overcome secrets of cabinets wrung from their inmost archives, espionage submitted to a keener espionage, that's double agents if you can count, and made to witness unwittingly of facts whose discovery became its despair. Yeah, that is the false history, by the way, as none of the facts come out. What a story of such things could Kossuth and Mazzini tell if policy permitted them to unseal their lips and declare the solicitudes and shifts by which the spark of republican freedom has been kept alive and carried over Europe. Take the young child and go into Egypt is a command and addressed to all who bear with them a precious deposit of truth. Are you following the instructions? The solace for me is that the meek will inherit the earth, and I cannot wait for that to happen, because the gods are really nice people and they have a huge sense of humour. Yeah, and it is really enthralling to realise that they are real after all of the years that I spent in sectors like this. Yeah, with your head down, enslaved, working at 3 o'clock in the morning so you can earn a pittance and you can get a new postdoc, and at the end of the story all of the postdocs desert you and become entrepreneurial presences somewhere, or they become so deeply entwined in the meaningless world of neuroscience that their lives are a total futile. It's a total life in futility, the last cause to be mentioned. But when you look at the nomenclature of the brain and its anatomy, it's part of the religious joke too. The amygdala, yeah, it's all part of the massive religious joke. Right then, the last cause to be mentioned of the prevailing disposition to fly into secret organisations is one that has not been sufficiently dwelt upon by those who have thought or written of the subject. We mean the obvious inability of existing society to meet the wants of the human soul. If you could pay everybody a decent wage and pretend that it was not impossible for the state to build factories in our country, to employ everybody, to let everybody have a life, to promote the tourist economy, to give everybody the same pay structure from the central bank, yeah, we could have a wonderful world. The birth rate would plummet down to 2 per family. You could promote that concept by giving them even more money from the central bank. It's simple to fix, but instead they opt to take the risk of them being lined up now by the impoverished children in front of the firing squad. Yeah, it's a really dangerous place, and Cameron knows that, which is why he's pulled out of Syria and he's pulled out of the no-fly zones in the Egypt concepts, and all of it is becoming relatively civilized, and all of that is really constructive. But it's still driven by this bullshit out of Oxbridge and the elite universities, where all of them get trained to steal, and not so much to kill now, because they know that the war crimes are being monitored, and they are the primary goal of the fraud researchers like me. That has them quaking in their boots. The actual relations of men to each other are almost universally felt as a burden, yet if not a curse. The struggles they engender, the long and painful warfare against poverty and disease, That has no inverted commas either. The long and painful warfare is not in bold print. The meanness, the falsehood, the competition, the cutthroat conditions of success, the smallness of the recompense. I don't know how much the soldiers get to get dysentery in the trenches in World War I, but believe me, it's not worth paying for. Yeah, and all of them give up the ultimate sacrifice. When you do succeed, the exaggerated importance given to the mere physical life and the low estimate put on all kinds of spiritual greatnesses, the anarchy of opinion in politics, philosophy and religion, the hollowness of church worship, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely. That's in inverted commas, but I've got no fucking idea what contumely is. Yeah? This is very elite writing, and it keeps the world in chaos because nobody understands the instructions, and that is perfect for the political background that we now live in. In short, 1,000 flagrant departures from our conception of what is just and true force us to take refuge not as Hamlet, the mythological false output from Shakespeare and Stratford-on-Avon, like the whole of the bullshit stories contemplated in the undiscovered country, but in associations which promise a great escape and relief with your Batman if you're lucky enough to be in Colditz. The harmonies of do you notice that it got really sticky when we discovered the Essen linkage to the Christianity fraud? But everything is free and lucid now, okay? And intercourse which we seek in vain amid the jeers and discords of our mere business. Yeah, the know-nothings, the hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, Freemasons, all of the jokers, all of the people that are in the media, they don't see it, they're obligated not to tell it. And it becomes Nottingham and Notting Hill. All is hard, cold, formal, distant and unideal, a social Nova Zembla. Don't know what that is. Could be a joke about New Zealand, because there is an Old Zealand, and I believe that's off Denmark, and New Zealand is in the South Pacific, where the heart is benumbed by the universal wintry air, and the better thoughts fall back like buds suddenly smitten by the frosts. Yeah, it's like the Burns Club. Yeah, it's incomprehensible. It's a joke about the people that are the real people of the world, and all of them get gulled into thinking it's something that raises their spirituality and their soul to a higher plane. And they pay a fee for it. Let us solace ourselves in some select and worthy fraternity composed of the finer spirits of the race, and that's why in the Amy song that Britney comes out with the fraternity gear on and the little stole round her neck and the very flagrant movements of her hips as she comes down the catwalk into the public eye. Watch the Dangerous Game video about the woman Moore, yeah, when Michael Moore needed multiple cover-ups in America. That's a song by Elton John. It's an earlier song by other crinkly pop stars, and all of it keeps getting retold so that they can keep profiting from what has been one of the most successful frauds in world history, because it's run for the whole of world history and they just keep replaying it. Let us solace ourselves in some select and worthy fraternity composed of the finer spirits of the race, and living not in its selfish propensities but according to a noble ideal of the heart. Yeah, like Princess Diana, nice woman. Let us sail away from this rude, coarse, overcrowded continent to some pleasant little isle in the golden tropics. Yeah, a lot of them do that, where the day, so long as it lasts, shall be a summer day. That's Branson's, the Tennants, the Connerys, the Murrays, yeah, the Tweedsmuirs, all of the Governor Generals, the ones who are landlocked are lucky enough to be on the Côte d'Azur, and the yacht can very quickly get them to the offshore havens that the really powerful people in wartime and peacetime get all the contracts in from the national governments that are stolen from and whose treasuries are empty, which is why they have to extend the debt pool to fund Virgin Atlantic and all of those West Coast Railway scandals. They're in the depths of our retreat, while the perfumed breezes blow gently over our cheeks, with hands grasped in warm fellow hands. Let us bow down and invoke that ideal of a true society which is grander than Christianity and as fair as the sweet companies of heaven. I don't think Branson will get his companies into heaven, and I don't know if there is one, but I know I will do everything I can to bring the world back to innocence on behalf of the children. Let us gradually prepare men for their future, for the equality, the liberty and the glory which is the right, by a secret regeneration which shall gradually extend over the whole of humanity. And that bit is in inverted commas, and I'm not at all surprised. Thus contemplative, ardent, ambitious and sympathetic minds are alike drawn from the immediate duties of life into partial and generally impractical schemes of secret reform. How I wish I had a violin! And thus organisations are recruited, or a piano, which is the piezo joke, which come in time to be the most formidable instruments in the resistance to the furtherance of the grander movements of society. Are you following it? And if I put a Christian cross behind me, would you behave yourselves? Strong, however, as the impelling motives of these associations are the forces of cohesion which bring them together, and the outside pressures which keep them, so they are intrinsically exposed to one or the other of two fatalities. I'm kind of lost now, but I'll keep going just in case any of you are inspired by this and you want to lead armies to war so that it can be established as firm doctrine. They corrupt inwardly, or they provoke outward hostilities which become their ruin. No matter how pure their original intentions, they sooner or later degenerate, or if they do not degenerate, they get to be so powerful that society, by an instinct of self-preservation, rises against their life. That's revolution. But because the Rothschilds fund both sides, everybody gets culled. And they let the elites flee to other countries or to the tax havens. And Napoleon himself, his body double, in the end was on Elba. The ancient mysteries were undoubtedly at the outset purely religious observances, but they became the scenes of a licentiousness which cannot be expressed in words. The very name of their ceremonies, orgia, this is the Mithraeum again, the emergent Church of Rome, with the Jews and the Christians and all of the other passers-by. I can't remember what Herod was. Herod got topped, if any of that story is true, but Herod's dynasty were very quickly in the Roman court, now signifying whatever is detestable and repulsive in human indulgence. The schools of Pythagoras in Greece at least excited an indignant insurrection, I think that's a revolution too, of the people, and that's a numbers game. If any of you follow this, could you please send me an email and maybe you could explain it to me? It's from Cornell University Library, and it explains all of the mythology behind freedom fighters. They're prepared to steal from the rich and give to the poor. The school arts have done that. The Knights Templars, who project The Temple Bar, by the way, is quite an evil place. Al Pacino talks about that and acknowledges it. The political unity of Europe ended as a grasping and avaricious sect. The Freemasons have never recovered the abduction of Morgan. And if we may believe De Quincey, yet that's Morgan, the theft projects in the banking dynasties, and it is the man who took over as the negotiator for the Lib Dems immediately after the last general election. Forget what his name is. He's a banking executive at JP Morgan and also at Barclays. David Laws. Yeah, their principal secret now is the imposing style in which the right worshipful Grand Master, that's the Duke of Kent, at the tennis tournament at Wimbledon, where the terror events occur and all of the MI6 operatives are there, causes the trembling neophyte to fork over his 2 guineas for a general supply of brandy and water. I think this bit is about ingesting alcohol, but I'm not entirely sure. In a word, our humanity will not be cheated. It will not permit any of its representatives to seclude themselves with impunity from the general masses. All of them have impunity from everything, and everything they do is a crime against the masses, even in its own apparent interests, for when they make the attempt, it either withholds from them the sources of life, allowing them to dwindle and mortify like a limb cut from the parent body, or you get a lot of that. The one true God thinks that is funny. Yet if it is one true God, but yet the amputees, it's quite amazing how many of the villains, like the Dukes of Buccleuch and David Murray himself, get the amputations, and none of them associated with their life up to that point, or it stimulates the jealousy of its fellows into internecine hatred. That's Michael Moore and Islam again. We have made a long preamble in what has been said to a few words which we have to utter about the know-nothings. Right then, let's get into this, because I might be able to follow it. But it was necessary to a proper understanding of the subject. It seems to us that the society which baptizes its members as ignoramuses, and which has made such strange havoc of late among the political parties, is in some sort a lineal descendant of the secret societies gone before. I do follow that bit. It is how the world fails to work. Yeah, the SS is the speculative society in Edinburgh. It is the Nazi Third Reich movement that demonised the Jews, and the Jews were demonised in America by all of the Jewish members of the Supreme Court, and all of the Germans were demonised, and everybody takes everything to war because it raises profits for these very elite planners. It has originated in many of the same causes and will in all probability share the same fate, whether its objects are as dignified or liberals as some of theirs have been. We cannot say, because in respect to those objects it is literally nescient. Yeah, I'm entirely lost. I hope you can explain it to me in those emails. Yeah, and I sent an email to the Minnesota governor who ran for president, because I was so disappointed last night that I was not allowed, after 6 hours of preparation, to talk about anything I had prepared in advance, and I was quite stunned that the Rothschilds are all over that county in America, because that's where the Fed Bank is. And it kind of stunned my friends into silence, and they went ballistic with me with the F words and the C words this morning, and physical threats of punching me on the face. So I unfriended them for a time. Yeah, I feel safer that way. They were not intellectuals. It refuses to declare its purposes, save as they may be learned from its acts, which fall ever and anon like claps of thunder. It's dark outside now. I don't know what the cloud cover's like, but John Lamont will be droning on like this, with a gullible audience in front of him. Yeah, like claps of thunder upon a startled world. But it is quite universally believed that its aim is to establish, that's not the American Indians movement, And it's not at that stage the stock market, but the stock market is launched and it's already defrauded the Bank of England based on the victory at Waterloo and the massive numbers of deaths in the jocular uniforms, but not in the baldricks with the medals on the chest and the hand on the pockets. It's to establish a strict Americanism in the public life of this country and in order, so the know-nothings in this story are in America, but the know-nothings in Britain are in Notting Hill and in the Nottingham stories. If this is to be so, we feel bound to say that its doctrine, as well as its discipline, is objectionable, or they're getting fightable like my mates on Facebook, and that neither, I've taped all of the conversations, by the way, in case they try and pull something on me. Yeah, all of them. All of the conversations in writing with the C words and the F words. Nor Christianity will justify the means or the ends it proposes. And that's where we're at now. As to the former, unless we have grossly mistaken the fundamental principles of a true state and a true church, the very idea of a secret organisation is at war with both. At war with the grand humanitarian aims, their open, manly, frank and comprehensive character. Yeah. Democracy is a theory of society which rests the liberty of all men upon a footing of perfect equality and bounds its sympathies. This is kind of ignoring the anti-communist movement. Let's read it again. Democracy is a theory of society which rests the liberty of all men upon a footing of perfect equality and bounds its sympathies only by the good of the whole people. Yeah, that's why none of the people in the public sector get any pay rise for 7 years. Yeah, can you see how the ideal has kind of slipped away into the shallow grave like the people that fight for it? It contemplates nothing less than the Commonwealth, or as the word truly signifies, the common weal. That's a wound, I believe. That might be a joke from the fascist end of the spectrum. It can entertain, therefore, no very friendly feeling for any scheme of action which falls short of that exalted and impartial scope. Universal in its nature, it has no occasion for concealment or stratagems. Its methods are open and above board, because its objects are not private nor exclusive but public. Yeah, like the pay freeze. What is it to be fear from the broadest daylight, the intensest scrutiny of the sun? That's the joke about the national anthem in America. I have not listened to the first 3 or 4 lines of it till now. It's about the sun god coming up in the morning. Or even, yeah, and then you've got the ramparts of their castles and their forts when they were killing the Indians, and they are running down the side with blood. Or even the purer search of God's own steadfast eye, question mark, but scorning whatever is sinister, every thing indeed which approaches the enigmatical, the obscure, or the indirect. How can it tolerate the dark works of an agency unknown to it? How many secret societies could you reel off as a simple ordinary person? Yeah, it is amazing. Everything is done with closed doors and as a strict secret, because all of it is criminal. But because the law societies meet in similar meetings and are the Freemasonic leaders, the world does not have a cat in hell's chance until we force them out of the back room into the public eye, and every official policy making meeting around the globe is documented and archived and openly published to all of the people. We've got the technology to do that now. Yeah, like they had the technology to translate the Nuremberg trials and inquests into any language in 1946. Hewlett-Packard did that, and when I was in my laboratory, the Hewlett-Packard computer filled up a large chunk of the laboratory, and that is way after man went to the moon. An agency which skulks like owls and bats at the first glimmer of the morning, and which, like the pestilence, walketh in darkness. More jokes about the sun god, yeah, and the Batman, and all of the stuff, and the owls, the hoot hoot jokes, yeah, and the owls are an icon for death, and all of it is totally twisted. Democracy says to its children, I am open, honest and free in the old world beneath the sensitive and grinding feudalisms of church and state. It's the feudalisms that mean that only people with a certain amount of land have the right to sex. That's the fornication under consent of the king story I told you, using this simple method of just reading Greg Hallett's insightful historical documents. Yeah, and everybody could not read or write right up to 1913 in the UK. I've got no idea how long it took them to launch education for the masses in America, but the delay for the Indians was 130 years after they had stolen their land and built the massive university campuses on what they had purchased for a pittance. Yeah, and the deals that you heard discussed in the Bob Hope comedy, that was Jane Russell, by the way. She's very like my wife when she was young. But my wife was not as good with a handgun. I'm led to believe that Pippa Middleton is very strong in that sector, like Putin in Russia. And I admire those more than any others in this form of world leadership. There may be reason for those who meditate good purposes to plot in secret and mature their benevolent plans under the wings of silence, but with me there can be no such need. Remember, we're not allowed to know who the author is. Let your thought be known, and who is there to harm you? Open your hearts that their good wishes may profit all. Why reserve anything unless it be evil? Why muffle and hide your tracks if you go about good? Are there wolves and beasts of prey to eat you up the moment you're exposed? Remember, the wolves were the people that brought up Romulus and Remus. Yeah, and that's the Roman Church. That's the might of Rome, and that is Marcus Aurelius under the pillow. Yeah, because the families continually cannot get on. In the same way, the church in the true idea